Can you just tell me in the chat box, what are the things you see if you look out of the window? Any birds? Do you see crows there? Can you put in the chat box? Oh, cats. Good. You can see cats. Nice. Hen. Yeah. Okay. Right. Have you ever wondered how all this came about? How this enormous diversity of life came about in the world? It's a very curious story, isn't it? And it's an astonishing thing. Okay, I know there are lots and lots of cats there. I see. Even here, there are lots and lots of cats. Now, from time immemorial, yeah, okay. There are a lot of people from all over the region. Now, the thing is, from time immemorial, people have wondered how this earth is filled with so many creatures, both plants and animals. And if you look through the microscope, in each grain of sand, I mean, each gram of sand, you can see millions of small, tiny beings too. Even when you look at, say, the actual number of organisms, species, it has been estimated that there is 20 million named species, but there are many others probably. For example, do you have any idea how many types of beetles are there? Beetles. Have you seen beetles? Do you have any idea? Can you just tell me, try to tell me how many different types of beetles are there in this world? Can you just put in the chat box how many types of beetles are there in this world? Can you just put in the chat box? Many, yeah. There are supposed to be 3.5 million species of beetles, and 30,000, at least 30,000 types of fishes. So from time immemorial, people have tried to find out or think about how these animals evolved. So as you know, there are various kinds of origin myths all over the world. And where did the science or critical thinking called scientific thinking originate? The modern concept of scientific thinking, you can say, developed, maybe it might have had its origins in many places, but developed properly as we know today in Europe. And most probably, extensively during the 18th, 17th, and 18th centuries. That was the start of the scientific revolution. So during that time, one of the people who have thought of evolution and thought of how species came to be was Charles Darwin. How many of you have heard of Charles Darwin? Can you say yes in the chat box? All right. Many people would have definitely heard of Charles Darwin. So what was Darwin's dangerous idea? It is not exactly that species changes from one thing to another, and that we all have different types of animals slowly changing from one to the other, leading finally to human beings and the animals that we know today. In fact, even from time immemorial, even from the time of the Greek philosophers, there have been an idea that slowly species or types of animals and plants keep changing from one to the other. All right. Now, if you look at the history, I think history is very important in science. If you look at history, say three things. If you look at Europe in the around 16th and 17th centuries, the main religious idea was that the Earth is only around 6,000 years old. Do you know, actually in our calculations, modern calculations, how many years old the Earth is? 4.5 billion. billion. All right. 1 billion is 1,000 million, and 1 million is 10 lakhs. Okay, 10 lakhs. So what is 4.5 billion? People believed that at that point of time that it was only around 6,000 years old. The Earth is only 6,000 years old. That was what people thought that time. And all the species, all animals and plants were just created like that at one point and on one day. And then it has remained like that forever. That was the idea that time. Then from 3 or 4 different specialities, 3 or 4 different types of experts slowly realized that this is probably not true. One of them were the paleontologists. Paleontologists. What do paleontologists study? Can anybody tell me? Paleontology. 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 Can anybody tell in the chat box? Can anybody tell me what do paleontologists study? Just tell me, what do paleontologists study? Buried bones. Yeah. Not only, yeah, history of life on Earth based on fossils. That is correct. Fossils can be anything. Fossils can be remains of animals or plants in the remote past. All right. It can even be a footprint in the mud, and with the mud later turned into rock, and the footprint remained there. So that can also be a fossil. Fossils can be fossils of, you can see, feces, or it can even be bones, as you said. It can even be remains of insects captured in tree sap that got solidified in time. So paleontologists studied fossils, and they realized that there are a lot of fossils of animals which are not found today. All right. Maybe Sadish can show us some of the fossils that we see or paleontologists saw at that point of time, and now also. Can Sadish show us, yeah, some of the, yeah, next one. This is Charles Darwin. Yeah, that we'll come to later. Next slide. Yeah, this is a fossil. This is a very common fossil of a creature found millions of years ago. Okay, another one. Next one. Yeah, this is a trilobite found around 3 billion years ago. It was there. No, 50 million years ago it was there. Yeah. Then next one. This is a dinosaur fossil. All right, you have all heard of dinosaur fossils. All right, I think we can stop sharing. And you see, so paleontologists suddenly found out that there were a lot of animals which are not there today in the fossil record. They even found out that looking at the layers of the earth, they could even see how old these were. And they realized that these were very, very old, some of them millions of years old. And the second clue came from geology. People like James Hutton and Charles Lyell. Names are not important. What is geology? What is geology? Can anybody tell me what is geology? Okay, I'll continue. The geologists are people who study the earth, rock formations, oceans, yeah, and mountains, etc. The physical structure and substance of the earth, their history. Yeah, Navneet has got a good net connection, I think. He's very quickly finding out everything about that. Yeah, that's nice. Nice. Now, Sadish will just show you that picture where you find a layer of the earth. This one. See, this is a picture which is in James Hutton's diary. Okay, this is way back in the 17th century, I mean 18th century. So James Hutton, here you can see evidence of layers of the earth which has got buried in a newer layer, and then it has fallen down and it has become horizontal. All right, I don't know whether you understand, but what happened is that James Hutton realized that this just cannot happen in 6,000 years. He realized that the earth was millions and millions of years old. That is the way in which he did that. Then another thing came from systematics. Okay, systematics. Let us go to the next slide, please. After the fossils, yeah, after yeah, this one. All right. Who was? Have any of you heard of Carl Linnaeus? Carl Linnaeus. 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 Carl Linnaeus.
Sir, I have.
Yeah. Who? What did he do?
So he instead of so previously the names of all these things were more than two species, more than two names, and Carl Linnaeus just limited them to two names.
Not yeah, he did. He named. Yeah, true. You are in one way correct. He named animals, and he found that if you name, if you try to classify an animal or any animal and plant, generally the whole plant and animals, whole plants and animals in the world can be classified, and when we classify them, it looks like a tree. You can see in the screen, it looks like a tree with a common stem. All right, looks like a tree with a common stem and bunches of organs. All right, now what does this tell you? Did you understand what I told you? It looks like the branches of a tree. All right, for example, what is the how do we now, following Linnaeus's original classification, almost with some modifications, how do you classify human beings now? What is the scientific name of human beings?
Homo sapiens.
Yeah, Homo sapiens. Okay, can you just tell me which is the kingdom in which Homo sapiens belong? Which is the kingdom? We have two kingdoms. Whole of the animal, I mean, the living beings are classified into various forms. Now, I'm not going to the details of the classification because there is a new classification which includes DNA data too. It's like archaebacteria, prokaryotes, eukaryotes, and all. But if you come to eukaryotes, it is again classified into single-celled animals, and then plant kingdom and animal kingdom. So in which group humans belong? Tell me.
Animal kingdom.
Animal kingdom. Fine. After the animal kingdom, there are various phylae. Phylae. After kingdom, there are various phylae. You know, the molluscans, the flatworms, the roundworms. Do we belong to any of these? No, no. Do we belong to flatworms? No. Echinodermats.
No.
Cylinderates. We don't belong to there. Where do we belong in the phyla?
Monkeys.
Chordata. Have you heard of chordata? Okay. Subphylum, I'll tell you. Then you will know. Vertebrata. Vertebrates. Have you heard of the name vertebrates? Yeah.
Yes,
No.
they are animals which have a backbone.
Yes, animals which have a backbone. Can you say examples of animals which have got backbones? Just tell me. Stingray, yeah. Fishes. Very, very good. Fishes are the oldest organisms that have a backbone. In actual fact, we all are descended ultimately from fishes. All are vertebrates. All right. Okay. Then fishes, then what are the other vertebrates you know of with backbone? Humans. Yeah, of course, humans. Then what are the types?
Birds.
Have you heard of birds? Excellent. Birds, reptiles, then reptiles, birds, then Mammals. Haven't you heard of mammals? Mammals. We are all mammals. Mammals. Any other mammals you know? Rat, rabbit.
Bear, whale,
Yeah. Bear,
Monkeys.
cat, dog.
whale, monkey, cats, dogs, humans. These are all mammals, which give birth to live young and feed them with their own milk. So we are all mammals. In mammals, where do we stand? Which family? The order Mammalia. In the order Mammalia, as per systematics of Carl Linnaeus, where do we stand? Which family do we belong? Can anybody tell me which family? You can just say cat family or dog family or something like that.
Monkeys.
Monkey family. That is true. He belong to the monkey family or primate family. All right. Primates include proto-primates like lemurs and monkeys and anthropoid apes like chimpanzees, gorillas. So we belong in the group anthropoid apes when we are closely related to the anthropoid apes. So this is how systematic started. So in the originally, Carl Linnaeus never thought that systematics, it looks like a tree, but he never thought that species changes over generations. But it was first actually a person, a student of Linnaeus called Buffon, who said that you see, it looks like this. So there could be a common ancestor to these common groups of animals. For example, humans, monkeys, other monkeys, anthropoid apes, gorillas, all must have evolved from a small ape-like ancestor or a small monkey-like ancestor. Another family is cats. You said there are lots and lots of cats there. Now what are the types of cats do you see? Cat-like animals. There are lions, tigers, isn't it? Cougars, wild cats. All look like cats. All behave like cats. All are carnivores. So these animals must have evolved from a small cat-like creature. Okay. Then there are other animals like horses, asses, cows, goats. All these animals which feed on grass must have evolved from a common ancestor. This was what Buffon thought. Okay. Now, in 17th century, that's in 1809, a person called Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck even gave a mechanism by which this can happen. All right. Have you heard of Lamarckism?
No.
Okay. See, Lamarck thought that uh, animals try to improve what they have, what they are in their lifetime. Like for example, suppose a horse-like animal is in a forest where there are very tall trees, and it cannot reach the tree to eat the leaves. So it stretches its neck, and its neck elongates, and it passes on this characteristic to the future generations. And slowly it becomes longer and longer and taller, and finally become a giraffe. Okay, this is what Lamarck said. But people realize that this doesn't happen. Acquired characteristics cannot be inherited, and this is wrong. Okay. So but during Charles Darwin's time, this entire thing was controversial. People did not believe that species changed, even though some people said that it might change. But Darwin was the first person. He was a naturalist. Initially, he wanted to be a doctor. He joined medicine. He was a Englishman. He joined medicine, but he could not continue. He left it. He came back. Then he wanted to be. I mean, his father made him join the seminary to become a priest. Then he was studying for a priesthood, but he didn't become that also. But he followed his passion to become a naturalist. So he became an expert in animals and plants a little bit. And then somebody called him onto a voyage on aboard a ship that went around the world, especially in South America and in some islands. And in these islands, he observed that each island has got its own particular type of animal and plant. And like Darwin finches. Very, very, very. It's a very what would I say? Very famous example of evolution is Darwin finches, in which what originally happened was that a small bird must have entered these islands. There are thousands, hundreds of islands there, and this small bird has come into the island, and wherever there are seeds, for example, in some islands there are very thick seeds, so these birds have developed a parrot-like beak to take out seeds from this and eat. And this particular finch in this island has become adapted to that island's food and other things. So it has become slightly modified. But in other islands, there are a lot of flowers. All right. So this particular finch has got a very long beak, like our honeysucker bird, which is a sunbird in our place, Adakakili and all that. So it has developed a beak like that to get nectar or honey out of the flowers. So Darwin found that these finches are actually one. Originally, there could have been one, but depending on the natural place where they have got modified into different species. So this kind of thing is what led him to the notion of natural selection as a mechanism for species change. You understood me? Did you understand? Can you say yes, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anybody who did not understand? Anybody? Okay. Most of you understood? Can I get more yeses?
Yes.
Okay. The thing is, see, I'll explain it more. What Darwin realized was there was another history behind that, because he came across an essay by Malthus, who said that food supply is limited, but any animal can have any number of offspring and the population will explode. Okay, I'll tell you an example. If a person has got 5 children, a couple, a man and woman has got 5 children, the next generation will be 5. But if they also each have 5 children, there will be 25, isn't it? Then in the next generation, there will be 25 into 5. So there will be a geometrical progression of human beings on the earth. And in no time, in maybe 10 or 20 generations, the earth will be full of people and we will run out of food. Run out of food. This can happen with any animal. For example, if you look at things like, say, fishes, any fish can have thousands and thousands of eggs. It will lay thousands and thousands of eggs. And if it can become in a few generations, the whole of any ocean can be filled with this particular kind of fish. But it doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Darwin realized that most of the offspring or children of any animal or plant usually dies. And who will survive? Those that has got the most adaptations to the environment will only survive. So this is called natural selection. So he realized that offspring or children resembles the parents, but they are not identical to the parents or with each other. Do you understand? Get me? Are there any siblings here? Brothers, sisters, 2 brothers, 2 sisters, like that? Can you say yes or no? How many of you have got brothers or sisters? Any of you must have got brother or sister, no?
I have sister.
How many of you got? You have got
I have
sister.
a baby sister.
You have got a baby. Do you resemble your brother or sister? Can anybody tell me? Do you resemble your brother or sister?
No.
Okay. No, some people do resemble, isn't it? There may be similarities in how you are. Do you resemble your father or mother? How many of you resemble your father or mother?
I don't.
Many may not. There will be a lot of differences. That is exactly what Darwin realized. But many may, no? How many of you have some resemblance to your parents? How many of you, your friends may say, oh, you look like your dad, you look like your mom? How many of you have said that? How many of you have experienced that kind of thing? Can I have a show of
I
hands?
have experience.
Yeah, all right. That is true. So this is exactly what Darwin realized, that the offspring or children resemble their parents and each other. But as you said, they are not identical. Unless you are you have an identical twin, you are never exactly like your brother, not exactly like your sister, not exactly like your father, nor exactly like your mother. But there are resemblances. So what he said was, even though offspring resemble each other, they have got variations. All right. So if you have 10, for example, I'll tell you one example. Say all bears in the Arctic region were originally brown. Okay. You still have got brown bears there, which are closely related to polar bears. As you know, polar bears are white. But when you come a little bit to the down, from the poles down to Canada, down to lower portions, you will see all the bears are brown. And these brown bears are very closely related to the polar bear. So we can probably think that all bears were probably brown at one point. But suppose one family of bears had to move to the polar region for some reason or the other. What's the peculiarity in the polar region? In the polar region, there is snow almost all the year round, isn't it? So what do bears eat? Bears eat other animals like seals and other animals. All right. But if a brown bear comes in a white background, a brown bear can be seen from a long distance. So what will all the prey animals do? They will naturally run away. So you can imagine a situation in which a bear family has got 10 or 15 cubs. And some of the cubs are very brown, but some of the cubs are with variation almost white or near white. What will happen when they grow up? These brown bears, the prey will see the brown bears from a distance in the snow and they will run away. And they won't be able to catch prey and they will die out. They won't be able to make any more children. But the white ones are better camouflage. They will not be seen in the snow that easily and they will be able to catch more prey. You understood me? They will leave more offspring. So a whiter bear will have more whiter offspring because they will always resemble their parents. So, but in the next generation too, there will be variation. So some will be more whiter than others. And these whiter bears will be more successful in finding prey than the more brown bears. So in the course of a few generations, maybe 10 or 20 or 30 generations, you can see all bears in the polar region become totally white. This is exactly how evolution works. So there is resemblance, but variation. In the variation, there is natural selection. There is struggle for existence. And there is survival of the fittest. Who survives? It is not the most strongest necessarily. It is not the most fastest necessarily. But who is best adapted to the surroundings and the best adapted to the environmental challenges is going to survive. So natural selection is that this is Darwin's idea. This is what he brought out in his book, The Origin of Species. But you should realize that at this point, Darwin had no idea of how heredity operates. What are human beings or what are animals and plants actually? What is a life form? Now we know all this. Okay, I'm not going to what Mendel did. Gregor Mendel, at the same time as Darwin, found out that there are factors which can breed and which can, kind of recombine to form, to cause bodily characteristics to change in pea plants, and he called them factors. Now we know that what factors are. What are these factors? What is the molecule that is responsible for heredity? Can anybody tell me?
Genes.
Yes, genes. What's a molecule? What's a gene? What's a
DNA.
molecule? DNA. Right. When was DNA discovered? Do any of you know? It is around 1950. Let me tell you. Now, what we know is that each animal or plant or microbe, how do we define life itself? What's a living organism? You can say that a living organism, just like your Android phone or computer or something, it is a thing. It's a closed system. It's a closed system. It takes in nutrients from the environment. And what do this thing use its nutrients for? It burns these nutrients by way of chemical reactions as fuel and uses it fuel to to kind of maintain an agenda. And what's an agenda? What's the agenda of a living being? What's the agenda of a living being? There are two agendas. One is to maintain its own internal structure and external structure, to maintain itself and to make copies of its own during its life. This is its agenda. And how does it do its agenda? It do its agenda by a software mechanism or a software code. There is a software code which enables it to do this. And what is this software code? It is its genetic instructions in its DNA. And where does DNA occur? In each cell of the body, in our own each cell of the body, in the nucleus, inside it, there is a set of chromosomes, things called chromosomes. And these chromosomes have got DNA coils tightly packed inside it. And how does it executes its agenda or give its instructions to the body to execute this agenda of maintaining its internal structure and making copies of itself? It does this by opening up pieces of or stretches of DNA, which we can call as genes. So a gene is a stretch of DNA which opens up when needed, and opening up of this gene, a thing called mRNA attaches onto it, and it makes a stretch of mRNA which is called transcription. And this mRNA goes out into the cytoplasm of the cell through holes in its nucleus, and then this RNA, with the help of ribosomal RNA, picks out amino acids from the cytoplasm and makes proteins. And what are proteins? Proteins are the major building blocks of an organism and the major functional molecules in any animal or plant. They are enzymes which enable chemical reactions. They are part of chemical reactions. They are part of our body structure. So by making proteins, periodically and at the correct time, the DNA is the software which gives instructions to the functioning of the organism or any life. Okay, you understood it. Okay, you may understand it very superficially, but this is what exactly happens. If you go back and read books, and if you go back and see programs on evolution, you will get a better idea. How genes work, how DNA work, etc. So what happens is that when a male animal and a female animal combine to create another child, another its offspring. For example, if a father and mother join together to create a child, half of the DNA comes from the father, half from the mother. Oh, this itself is a source of variation. Okay, before these combine together, there are two pairs of chromosomes inside each, inside the father and inside the mother also. So they will undergo something called crossing over. So they will mix up their genes, and then this mixed up gene, half of it is given to make the child, then half from the mother. Then this is how variation. So with this mixing comes the variation that we experience among children. So this along with the mixing, there may be random changes in the structure of DNA. This is called mutation. So you can see that is due to sexual mixing of DNA and something known as meiosis. During meiotic division, there is something called crossing over which happens in the gene or the DNA, as well as random changes which are called mutations. These are the ones which cause variations in our children or in the offspring. All right. Yeah. Can we see that presentation? In the presentation, I'll show you DNA and the structure. Next one. This is how the present classification is. There's bacteria, archaebacteria, and eukaryota. And in the eukaryota, you have all the vertebrates and all that. Next one. This is a DNA picture of a DNA molecule. So you can see that chromosomes, there are there are now in human beings, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes. So total of 46 chromosomes, and one chromosome looks like this. And if you unravel the chromosome, you will get the DNA. Next one. This is the DNA molecule, internal structure, close-up of a DNA molecule. You can see it has got something known as nucleic acids, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. So guanine will only bind with cytosine. Adenine will only bind with thymine. So you can see that each DNA molecule is like a zipper. You know zipper, no? In your trousers and all that, or in the bag, in your luggage, you have zipper. So one will lock only onto the one half of the other. So it can make copies of each other. So only thing it has got to do to make copies of each other is to unravel. And nucleotides will come from the cytoplasm, from the nucleus, and nucleotides will come and join the other half automatically, and it will become two. So this is the basis of heredity. It took a lot of time to find all this out. You understood? Just only from 1950. You just cannot imagine the excitement at that point of time in 1950 when Francis Crick and Watson, Crick, and Wilkins, they got the Nobel Prize later. Of course, it was one of the greatest discovery in the whole of science, DNA, and how we, this is the key of life. This was the one which we were missing. People are saying soul, vital force, something. This is it. This is the main thing which determines who we are. Human, you have human DNA, you have horse DNA, you have chimpanzee DNA. From chimpanzees, we have around 1% difference. That's all. But that 1% makes us human. All right. I think that's it. You can stop screen sharing. I think right now there is a lot of information which I have given you, which I feel more may be a problem. I think we can go for questions and which we can answer. So to summarize, I'll just tell you that this enormous diversity of life which we see all around us came about by evolution, a mechanism called evolution, which was described properly for the first time by Darwin. But before that, geologists and paleontologists and people who systematically used to study animals had thought that, okay, this tree of life might have evolved from a common ancestor and slowly over millions of years. But Darwin was the first one to argue compellingly for this. It was a huge book, Origin of Species, and he anticipated every type of challenge or question that will be raised against his theory, and he tried to answer them. And he also found out that the mechanism of evolution is natural selection. He realized that there is variation, there is struggle for existence, and there is natural selection by which animals slowly change from one to the other. Now, this is an astonishing hypothesis that whole life on Earth must have evolved from a common ancestor animal or plant, whatever you call it, a very simple, yet considerably complex at that point of time. Now, before that, what happened is a totally different ball game. Origin of life is a totally different ball game. But after that ancestor came to be, then we have a fair idea of what happened. And there is a branching, diverging, a divergent evolution. There was natural selection. There was struggle for existence, which brought about all this diversity of life which we see on Earth. Not only that, it brought into being us, human beings like us, who can think about all this. Isn't it so wonderful? Isn't it really a wonderful, astonishing thing? If you can think about it, you can see. How many of you think that this is an astonishing thing? How many of you think this is a wonderfully astonishing thing? How many else? Okay, good. Nice. Right, good. That's why what I wanted to convey. If you have any comments or questions, I think we should do it now. You can either put it in the chat box or we can put it in, you can unmute and talk one by one. See, I don't know the answers to all questions, but whatever I know, I can tell. Whatever we don't know, nowadays there is no problem. We can always look it up in the net. The trick is to ask the correct questions now, because answers are easy. Navneet has asked, what is Yeti? Actually, Yeti has nothing to do with evolution. Yeti is a mythical animal which people have claimed resides in the Himalayas, but nobody has seen it properly or taken a proper photograph. And I really doubt whether it exists. It may be just a legend. Any other questions?
Sir, what is the full form of DNA?
Deoxyribonucleic acid. That is the full form. Okay, RNA is ribonucleic acid. This comes because of the structure of the DNA, which I don't want to go into. There is a deoxyribose sugar skeleton on which these nucleic acids are kind of attached.
Yeah, I'm Joseph here. Can I ask one question? Is the unicellular organisms, does it have all this kind of complex system like like a DNA and nucleic acid, what is it? Chromosomes and all this, what you explained.
Yeah, I'll tell you. There are, if you look at it, that is what I told you. I mean, told because the origin of life is a totally different question from the explosion of life that we see now. If you look at the explosion of life, we can only trace back to a mythical animal from which we are all evolved. And at that point, that animal is actually quite complex, extremely complex. If you look at our simplest single cellular organism, we can see that there are prokaryotes, which are more primitive, and eukaryotes, which are more complex. We are all eukaryotes. Things like amoeba is a eukaryote. Amoeba is a eukaryotic cell. Now, if you look at a eukaryotic cell, which is a primitive single-celled organism, you look at an amoeba, it has got everything. It has got a nucleus, it has got a DNA arranged in properly, almost like chromosomes inside it. It has got mRNA. It has got a very complex cell structure. It has got proteins. It can move. It can sense. It can move towards chemical this thing. It is a complex thing. If you look like a prokaryote, like a bacteria, you can see some of them don't have a proper nucleus. But in the center, you can see that it has got DNA molecules. And it's almost the same kind of thing operates. Almost the same kind of enzymes help it to replicate, like DNA, isomerase, all that. If you look at in that way, it is it's quite astonishing that even a prokaryotic organisms like bacteria has got DNA. And if you see only a virus, some viruses, like for example, this COVID and this HIV virus doesn't have DNA. It has got only RNA, ribonucleic acid. So what it does is it uses this RNA to get into a host cell and then fools the cell into thinking that it is part of its own and uses the host DNA to make copies of its own. So it's a parasitic thing, all right. And there are some people who think that viruses, maybe RNA is the original molecule, hereditary molecule, and not DNA, based on this. But there are people who say no, it cannot be, because it can always be that these viruses evolved much later as parasites. So we are not sure. So as far as we know, the prokaryotes are quite complex, and the original then in the next class, that's what I'm going to tell you, evidences for common ancestry and for evolution. So when you look at that, this thing called Euca, which is the proposed organism, which is the original grandfather or grandmother or whatever of all life on earth, was quite complex organism with a quite complex metabolism, quite complex heredity, and probably with DNA.
Thank you. One more. The finger, a human, when it's a child, what decides how long the finger should grow? And as he grows up as a adult, still, the growth rate is, it is somehow it is not manipulated. It is, decided.
Yeah, I understand what you are telling. I understand that, because see, this is a very, very complex thing that is happening, and most of it is happening in the embryo in an embryo. If you see the embryo, maybe the second week or third week, embryo of humans, embryo of a hen, or an embryo of a rabbit, or an embryo of another thing, of a fish, it has got, it's very similar. It's very similar. But what happens is that at various points, genes are switched on and off at various time. For example, there will be a difference when if a gene switches on at the second week and if the gene switches on at the third week, or how long this gene switches on and how much molecules of this particular enzyme, protein or hormone it generates. So it in the embryo, it acts by a very complex combination of switching on genes, switching off genes, when it switches on, at what order, what switches on first, and then what switches off then, like that. So it's an extremely complex thing in the embryo. Not only that, one example I will tell you. For example, in our in animals, in humans, our body plan is essentially a female body plan. What happens in third or fourth week of gestation is that in males with the XY chromosome, testis develop, primitive testis develop, and the primitive testis secretes testosterone. This testosterone immediately suppresses the uterus and other female characteristics from forming and promotes the formation of male characteristics, male genitalia, male this thing, and even the brain. It even reaches the brain and creates some changes in the brains, which there will be a minor changes in the brains of animals, females and males. And again, this happens during puberty. So during puberty, again, this happens. It happens throughout life. So in puberty, what happens is that the testis starts secreting large amounts of testosterone, which is a trigger for various genes to switch on at various points in the human body, in a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old, including the brain. And you see, these switches will decide whom he will get attracted to. Will he get attracted to another female, or will he get attracted to another male itself? There can be slight problems in these switches which can create trouble. So it is not genetic determinism. Even the environment also acts. Suppose it is an environment where there are a lot of, then there will be different type of switches happening and different types of genes which are switched on. For example, if child is well looked after in childhood, there will be a slightly different way in which genes get switched on. And if the child is very badly malnourished and badly treated in his childhood, the genes might switch off and switch on in a different way that will create some lasting effects on him or her. So this is the way in which this happens, very rough.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's why the human are wonderfully and fiercely created. Yeah, what about the plant kingdom, the fruit? It has got a shape, and it also grow to a certain extent. It do not overgrow, except some cases. So that also do have this complex DNA structure or something similar to that?
Yes. It is same. That is the most amazing thing about it. In the plant kingdom, it operates same. The heredity is almost the same. There is a fundamental difference between plant kingdom and animal kingdom in only a very few basic biochemical pathways in which photosynthesis takes place and plants can generate food from sunlight. Other than that, a lot of metabolic pathways and hereditary pathways are same in plants and animals. But I am not an expert in plants. I cannot tell too much about it. But the basic things are same. This is how it happens.
Thank you.
In plants. Thank you. Navneet, brain-eating amoeba. Forget about it. Forget about it. Brain-eating amoeba is a kind of microbe which causes a disease, a meningitis. It's not it doesn't eat brain or anything. It's a disease causing microorganism. That's all. Any other questions?
Sir, I have one doubt. Sir, sir, you were clarifying the doubt to another person who asked now. Sir, from there, one doubt arises in my mind that, sir, if the viruses infect our cells, sir, then the cells would have a mechanism to prevent that, like apoptosis.
Yeah.
So the cell dies. Sir, so how the cells get infected and the diseases such as SARS and all?
Oh, that's a very complex question.
Sir,
As I said,
especially if you are taking the case of corona.
yeah, in the corona, see, it's the thing is in any virus, what happens is that the virus tries to get into the cell and make copies of itself. The body tries to prevent it by our immunological mechanism. So in bacteria, when there is a bacterial invasion, what happens is that we have white blood cells, then we have macrophages, various other things which will mount and eat up. Basically, it can eat up or chemically try to neutralize it with chemicals. This is what very roughly what happens. Very rough. Immunology is a huge topic, but what I'm saying is this is what happens. Then what happens is that when a virus gets in and it makes a lot of viral bodies, there are viral protein particles which will be taken by the cell machinery and it will be shown outside the cell membrane as a signal for other immune mechanisms, other immune cells of our own body to destroy this cell. So this is what the apoptosis you are talking about. It's not really apoptosis. What happens is that as a virus making cell will express certain viral proteins on the outside of the cell, which is a signal for our immune system to attack it and kill that cell. So what happens if you have immunity to the virus? The virus cannot overwhelm our defenses and cause disease. But if your immunity fails, and it can fail in certain instances, there is always an evolutionary race going on between viruses and humans, or bacteria and humans. Okay, the bacteria always try to evolve better attacking mechanism which can overwhelm our immunological defenses. We try to do by evolution, our immune mechanisms try to adapt by countering these measures. So it's always a battle going on over millions of years. So nobody will win. This battle will go on. All right. This is what happened.
Thank you.